right.
Hey, Carl.
Yes.
I don't know what my name says because I'm not on my Nomor computer. It's Vinny. Hey, who's hosting it, or who's all on this discussion today?
It's just a group. We invited some folks to come and talk through the future of lighting. It's more like a roundtable.
Well, I see Michael and Diana are on.
Yep.
Hello.
Hey,
Yeah, we
sweet.
woke up. Just for you, Carl. We just got out of bed. Just for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Who's Tim, Vinny?
Oh, hey, that's what the name is. That's my dad.
Oh.
I am at his house right now, and we are using his tablet.
Nice. I thought you changed your name in the witness protection program.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
4 minutes and then we'll get started.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
You guys are up early.
Hand me the phone.
Sunday's a day of rest.
Videos on YouTube channel or somewhere. I don't know if I can preview them.
I tried to get Dr. Peace in here, but he had other things going on, unfortunately.
Over reading and that's it's done.
Look at your screen.
Get the chat open.
Carl, do you think you had anybody representing X-Lights, any of the developers on the call today?
Here. Hopefully,
Yeah, I might be.
some of the other folks will join.
What's that Keith's up? Talk about being early or late, I guess.
Yeah, it's about 3 a.m.
Oh, hi, Keith.
morning.
We're definitely honored to have you here that early.
Yeah, 3 a.m.
Definitely. That's early. For
is-
sure.
Yeah, it's about an hour earlier than I normally get up.
Yeah. All right. It is 1 o'clock.
I think Australia is about as far from the East Coast time in the U.S. as you can get.
Well,
Yeah, we're about 12 hours. We're about 11 hours outside of GMT. Is that during summer or winter? I can never remember. We're 9 and 11. So that's the worst. West Coast is actually not that bad. It's only like 5 hours.
No, I know I deal with a lot of people in China for work, and it's almost exactly 12 hours.
Yeah, they're another 2 across.
So they're easy to remember because you just change AM to PM and you know what the time is. You know, Australian, that throws me off all.
Yeah, I'm just adding an hour, adding 2 hours and flipping the clock.
I think PPD will be joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully they'll find a room. So thank you everybody for coming. The reason we put this together, this is going to be more of a roundtable. And of course, Ed put this on the schedule and said, Carl, deal with it, get folks in here so we can kind of talk about the future of life. There's no real set agenda on this. I just wanted to try to put together some of the vendors and customers and kind of talk through as a roundtable where we see the hobby going. It looks like it's been going about 100 miles an hour since last year. And so where do we see ourselves even through the second half of this year, which has probably been one of the craziest years we've had so far. Where do we see this going? So really, it's just kind of an open discussion. So I think Keith, you want to go ahead and start what you think. We can go from there. Keith?
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you mention me. Okay.
You lead off.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we did something similar to this back at Easter. We had an online mini down under, and yeah, we spent a bit of time looking across all of the areas, both hardware, props, lights, etc. I mean, okay, where to start? I mean, it's probably better if we pick an area and we talk about either controllers or lights or density or whatever else, rather than just sort of where do I think everything's going? Because you're right. I mean, there's lots of things going on, and they're all going on at different paces in different areas. The hobby's getting busier. Obviously, it's a lot easier as a hobby to get into. There's been a lot of work done in all spaces, whether it's controllers, props, etc., that is lowering the barriers to entry. Not necessarily lowering the cost, but although there's definitely a lot of price pressure that's going on across a whole bunch of things as well. As the hobby grows, of course, the number of people grows, and it's clear that the amount of friction across the various groups and the like is also increasing. The partitioning of the community along a whole bunch of different lines is also seems to happen in various areas. I think it is getting easier, and I think it's still very enjoyable to be in the hobby, but yeah, I don't know.
So let's take an area here. Let's start with just in general, just the way displays. After last night, we spent some time with the GCLF Roundtable, right? And just where that's come in the last several years, and how it's changed just in general, just from layouts and what do we think about that? Where now they're looking for a lot more exposure from folks getting into the hobby, and of course, it's still primarily a DIY hobby, but everybody wants instant gratification, right? And to be able to get their 15 minutes of fame on TV.
People don't do small shows at the beginning anymore. At least some people don't.
It's amazing how much money somebody will drop out as a beginner. You'll see somebody post, I just spent $10,000 on controllers and pixels, and not know how to put two wires together. So it is pretty interesting how deep.
Well, and the thing is, they end up being gone after a year a lot of times, because they get so frustrated because they see this, they want it, and they don't start small. And the next thing you know, they have to have somebody else completely doing it. And during the season, if anything goes wrong, they have no clue what's going on. And sometimes it becomes very frustrating, and they end up selling their stuff after the first year. I mean, it's really interesting.
Although there's not that much secondhand stuff for sale, though, is there, Mike?
Well, there are in areas,
Yeah.
every once in a while here, we'll get one or two people saying, hey, I've got all this, I want to get rid of it. But you're right. They may hold on to it, but it's I don't understand the whole thing of going huge that first year and just having headaches. And really, it's more of a job, and your family's upset with you.
I mean, even with experience, I would think it'd be a challenge for any of us to start from zero and say, I'm going to build a 5,000 pixel show in a couple of months and get it all running perfectly, let alone when you don't have any experience.
True.
But I will say, Keith, you made it a lot easier. I remember when I first started, all the tools that are in X-Lights now, definitely, I think it makes it from a setup procedure, if you stay in the right products, it's a lot easier to set a show up from the beginning. Back in the days, even before start channels and stuff, if it was, you had a lot of.
I think that's true end to end, right? I mean, vendors have made it easier to buy pixels. It was only a few years ago where, if you wanted to buy the pixels, you either had to go direct to China or you had to join these pre-buys, which, you'd buy your pixels or you put your money in February, and if you got it by July, you were lucky. These days, you just turn around and you send off your order, and if you're in the US, you seem to get it within a few days or a week or so. It's everything's become a lot easier. The amount of information that is available to people, if anything, has gone the other way. It's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got an opinion.
That is very true.
Well, I got a, I guess I got a question if we, are looking for a topic here. This is kind of directed at Michael and, or Michael Downey.
What?
You're kind of on like the verge, you're keeping in touch with all the Pixel stuff and being a vendor in that. With the progression of things being right now, 2020 moving and 2019 moving to such high density stuff, do you see a market turning more in higher voltage pixels? I mean, right now we've always stayed in 5 and 12 volt, but the 24 exists out there. Why is it so rare, or do you think it's going to ever be more common?
Not just 24 or 48. I got a hold of a secret pixel from a big company down here that does, that just does the outlines of houses, right? And it was a 48 volt pixel. And, and obviously it was created so, you could do however many, without ever having to do power injection or whatnot. And it was much larger, obviously, than the pixels we're looking at today. I do see us going that direction because, like Keith was saying, things are getting easier. We've started to be able to get pixels a little quicker for better pricing. We've Keith and the crew have made it easier to be able to set up X lights and get things into it. I mean, heck, you've got several people even doing sequencing, and putting together your model, all your models, and doing your sequencing and everything. But it would be quite something when all of a sudden we stop talking about power injection. All of a sudden you just like the regular LED lights, you just plug in this many and it just plays, it just goes. I don't have to worry about
Can it really go that far though? Can it really go that far given how custom everything ends up being?
Yeah, I got to tell you, these are national companies down here like Jellyfish, Trim Lights, and I think there's a couple of other ones. And I've kind of studied those guys because I've got a Rambler house and I've got 107 feet across the front of my house of roof line. And I thought, this would be cool if these guys could come and put this stuff up and whatnot. And when I got bids of $2,500 and $3,000 to do it, I kind of choked. But when I looked at their lights, these guys can run. They put a controller and a power supply in one place only in the house, and normally in the garage. And if that garage is on the side, they run the full gamut of all those lights. And it's pretty impressive, actually. It really is pretty impressive. So like Vinny was asking, yeah, I can see us going that direction. The only problem is that right now the technology, it would change all of us. Boscoyo's kind of, and Gilbert Engineering and others have kind of gotten us really into this bullet and square pixel, certain size, because all props are made that way, all strips are made that way, everything is made that way. And so we're kind of stuck in.
Although that's not where it started, right? It actually started with those larger pixel forms, the GE color effects, and so it's people have migrated towards bullets and the like out of convenience. I mean, square nodes were more popular than I think they are now. I think they've become less popular just because they're harder to use. They're harder to use in the props.
I totally
48
agree.
volts. 48 volts, a lot more people are going to fry their controllers if they're running them at 48 volts by plugging things in incorrectly.
Yes.
Fewer people know anything about electronics in this hobby than used to. It used to be that unless you were willing to solder together your own controller, it was a hard hobby to be in. These days, the devices are much more plug and play. Yeah, there's a bit of wiring involved, etc., but it's not complex. And, with 12 volts and, some reasonable planning, and with all of these, what the controller vendors have done is they've gone from a situation where you had 600 pixels and one output port on a controller to, you have 1,000 pixels, but you can then split it up across so many little individual devices where you just screw connect your pixels onto it and you're done. It used to be that, people would try and build a big mega tree and run it off a single controller. Now they just run lots and lots of ports and 100 pixels off each one, and it's not such a drama. And
Right.
not everyone's going to do it that way, but the people that are really scared of the electronics have that option.
Yes. But the neat thing too that I see in the direction we're going is that we always have those people willing to try different things. The ones that were here in the beginning that kind of understand. And the hobby has changed greatly. I remember when we first started RGB, it was 100% brightness. No one even thought of going lower. You plugged in the lights and you went, and that was it. And obviously a couple of people tried it at lower voltages and brightness, and found out, oh my gosh, now I can do 250 pixels off a 12
And they actually look better too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, they
So-
do.
Yes, so we always have these individuals that are willing to go out and try different things and be able to pioneer different things. And sometimes it ends in disaster, but other times it changes the complete hobby.
But again, people share that information so much
Yes, they
more
do.
readily now. Right?
Which
People
is-
share their experiences, and the controllers support it. I mean, if you were using an old Joshua Systems, right, there was no brightness control at the controller
Right.
level. Now you couldn't sell a controller without brightness control.
Exactly.
Is that the J1 Sys you're referring to, Keith?
Yeah, Joshua Systems, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you bring up an interesting point. Everybody's sharing so much information. How do you break that information down and make an informed decision?
Well, and that's what I said. It's gone the other direction. It's now not that you can't find information, you almost can't consume that information.
And I think that's the overwhelming part. But I can tell you, just from a vendor's point of view, that I get a lot of people that I don't just sell pixels to. This is my first year, or this is my second year, and I'm adding something. And what do I do? And it's not enough to be a vendor just to go, here's a price, here's a pixel, here's a whatever it is you're selling. You've got to be able to be fairly knowledgeable and help those folks out, because they're really looking to you to say, oh crud, what do we do here?
Right. But where's it going next though? Right? How do we, I mean, I've always been a big fan of making it easier and opening the hobby up. I think, making the hobby bigger and easier to get into enriches us all, because new people bring new ideas and new concepts and the like. How do we make it even easier for people to do it and to lower the frustration and just make it easier to get your show going?
With those 48
It's already being done, I think. I mean,
well,
if you
sure it
look at
has been, but how do we take it further? I mean, there's no point resting on our laurels here, right?
well, yeah, no, I agree. I think some of the new things in X-Lights that allows you to get your show running faster from a digital perspective is fantastic. How do you take that further? And I don't know what type of logic you can put in X-Lights to make it easier. Drag and drop.
I don't think it's just X-Lights, though, Ron. I'm not just talking X-Lights. I'm looking at all dimensions. How do we make it easier?
You think maybe with the 48 volts, then you just use the controllers as sending the signal, the data signal, and you have a 48 volt power supply that just supplies the power to the lights, and kind of like the F48 does, except for it does have a differential with some power hookup. But
well, why has no one ever come up with a scheme? I mean, I don't know, but most people I know don't really run their lights through their controller as such. They don't drive the power through their controller. I know some people do, but most people just bypass the controller. They take the data and they take the ground out of the controller, and then they run everything.
I don't know that that's a most.
yeah, and it helps keep from frying the controller up too then.
Yeah, the controller is designed to push power and data. It doesn't mean it should, but that's the way I was
it's
taught.
designed to, but it runs into constraints, right?
Sure.
Why has no one ever come up with some simple way for people to drive more without driving it through the controller?
That's a good question.
So you're talking about, easy peasy power injections, so to speak, or something that
Yeah,
controls
well,
that for you.
I'm
data
imagining some
repeaters
sort
or-
of plug where you would put your power and your pixels into the plug, and you'd plug it into the socket on the controller, but it wouldn't take the positive line through the controller. It'd bypass it and just drive your pixels. Then you could
Doesn't
do
that
48 volts
complicate it,
safely.
So,
That's
so a
true.
separate data and power management that work together, but don't put the stress on the controller.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you could do 48 volts safely because you wouldn't have to put the 48 volts anywhere near the controller.
It'd be interesting, Keith, in the same way that we can throw
Well, why
receivers
48
out at the
volts?
point of consumption. Why not be able to do the same thing with power without it being a part of the receiver? I kind of see where you're going. I think it's
Well, the
interesting.
lights, yeah, you have one data plug and then the power source plug on the end of the strands, or beginning of the strands. I mean,
Yeah, you'd almost want something that was sort of a screw-in type thing, and it would, I don't know whether it would come with multiple wires, but something would still plug into the Euro connector on the board because that's what's there. But it would allow you to introduce the power and introduce the grounds and the signal and everything safely. And then people could do whatever. It would open up your options around things. Because today, if you wanted to do 48 volts, you would have to seriously know what you're doing.
And
Don't you think the usage? I mean, there's not a lot of people. I mean, 5 and 12 is what everybody's been programmed on, right? So you're not seeing a lot of 12, 24, or I'm sorry, 24 or 48 volt. I think if people start moving into that, that's probably going to push some of those innovations. It's going to
Right,
push.
but the same reason that
control,
people
right?
like 12, they'll love 24.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but Keith, when you're talking about the future of the lighting industry, so as a newcomer to the sport or the hobby, are you talking about the future as for getting more new people involved, or for the existing ones?
I'm talking about lowering the barriers to entry, lowering the, and I don't mean things like cost and the like necessarily, though clearly there's opportunities to do that, although who knows what's going to happen after the economies will tank.
Because one of the things that I was thinking about is that especially as seeing that last year was my first year, is maybe some standardizing of some things. So there seems to be always a toss up between 5 volts and 12 volts. That's one, that maybe there needs to be a standardizing. The connectors, so like they're the Rewu connectors and the X connectors and so on. And so I think standardizing a couple of things will then simplify for a number of people.
But I think
so that then
I think
there's
the
no
market
toss up of
drives that.
right. But the thing is that even though the market drives that, at the end of the day, the consumer invariably drives the whole thing. So as a newcomer to the activity, to the hobby, what I could tell you is, for me, is that if there was some sort of standard thing, so in other words, no matter who I got a prop from or who I got pixels from, that those connections worked one in one, not that, oh wow, I bought the wrong connection. Now I have to specify, is it an X connection or is it a Rewu connection? So that's one. The second thing is that based on the discussion last night, it is more than obvious that 5 volt pixels seem to be the more energy efficient one. And so therefore, maybe why isn't it just being driven out to 5 volts? Now I know for the power injection, yes, but the truth is that if there's no toss up, then it simplifies that. The third thing as a newcomer to the activity is that if there was some way of doing it with less wires and more, where I could put a lot of this stuff out in the yard and I don't have to run a barrage of wires out to the yard, that would really help me as a newcomer.
and we're
but where's the fun in that?
but so, right, look and see where the wireless controllers have come. There are more people doing wireless, but yet there's no challenges with wireless as well.
Right. No, I don't dispute the hardwire is good, but also what I at least for me, like right now I'm looking to put in a new mega tree, and I can't seem to find an actual video of somebody building one from start to finish with all the connections and all the power injections, where it goes and how it works. I have looked high and low, and I can't seem to find a video that shows, okay, I'm going to build
And
this
that's
myself.
because
What do I do?
That's because making a prop build video from front to end requires so much upfront planning, and most of us don't plan that far in advance. It's
That
one
is-
thing to
oh
come
my
back
gosh,
later and
amen.
explain what you
Nope.
did. It's another thing entirely to say, I'm going to explain it as I go.
No, but I think what was great is like for me, I built all my controller boxes based on Steve Nee's videos, which was quite detailed, and I found that made doing it so easy.
Like
And
for
everybody's build is
example.
going to be different.
Yeah.
I run 12 volt. Somebody may run 5 volt. I employ zero power injection in my show because to me that is a hobby in itself, and I like that. But
Right, no,
it's hard
no,
to
but-
do that. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of behind the scenes tutorials. I think you have to go out and hunt for some of it and
Right.
explore these videos.
So how do you,
But the thing about it though, Ron, is that like in other words, if there was like a standard place where we could go to and get all those things, which would, because the truth is, I think the future of the hobby is to have more people involved, because the ones who are already there will definitely explore and do different things different ways. But I would think for you, the vendors, the more the merrier that you have actually involved coming into it.
Robert, let me tell you something. I don't know why the different ends came to be. I don't know whether it was an innocent, hey, I'm making some lights, I'm going to use this end, or whether there was some thought in it saying, hey, I need to change this around, because you'd be shocked. Ray Wu, Paul Zhang, X-Connect, Daniel Zhang, DIY, Holiday Core. I mean, there's literally tons of them out there. And part of the problem we run into is that and then sometimes a company will rename a standard thing, to make it sound different. So you have to buy from them, you're scared to go anywhere else. And the thing is that I agree with you. When I started this, you didn't buy pixels with an end on it. You bought a string of pixels, and then you bought pigtails. And then if you didn't know how to solder, you plugged in the solder gun and prayed to the solder gods that you weren't going to kill yourself while doing it. But the thing is now, the thing Keith is talking about of making it easier, it makes it a little bit more difficult on vendors, because now you have to have a certain amount of pixels with these ends, a certain amount of pixels with these ends, a certain amount of pixels with these ends, instead of just pixels.
Yeah.
And then you have to have the power tees for all of them, and the pigtails for all of them, and everything else.
Yeah, I'd like to address the standardization, Mike, because 3 years ago I was in a group of like-minded people, and everybody was at the table saying, how do we steer this? How do we find some way to train everybody to make their experience easier for an easy entry point into this hobby? And my attitude at that time was, gosh, save who you can. And not long after that, Existentials was born, which became a great platform for training. But we're still having the same conversation today, 3 years later, about the same issues of standardization. I don't believe we're going to see standardization anytime soon.
Because there's competing forces, right? As
Right.
if you're a new vendor, standardization is a door in. If you're a vendor that's established, standardization is the enemy of lock-in, and you want a certain amount of people to be coming back to you over and over again, particularly when people come in and try to just undercut you on price.
Ugh.
Well, the
Right,
consumers
but-
are going to have to make that decision and just stick with one connector, and then everyone purchase that one, and the rest of them go away then.
But then, Keith, if you have standardization, then doesn't it give you that opportunity now to explore, like for the people who now are already in the hobby, to now really spend more time developing different things and new things? So like for me, one of the things that I look at here in Trinidad every year, we have a big carnival event where it's a number of people on the road. And we actually have something which is called a night marathon. And I'm thinking, boy, if I could just do something wireless, I could actually come to some of these bands and actually do like a light display with 3,000 to 10,000
I'm not
people.
saying it's a bad idea, Robert. I'm not saying it's a
Yeah.
bad idea. All I'm saying is that there are market forces at play here, and there will always be, to some degree, in every market that you can think of, there are variations. It's why our TV standards aren't all the same. It's why our video standards aren't all the same, because there are market forces here, and you'll always get some of that.
Yeah, and as a vendor,
Can
it's
I ask
tough.
a question? When is the matrix density thing going to stop? Is P5 it?
No,
P1.
Keith. We have to get to P1.
Why?
I-
Why do we
Large,
have to
already
get
put a
to
large
P-
screen TV out there, right?
Sorry,
you know,
I'm
I've
changing
already
topic.
been playing with P3.
Yeah,
Kathy, who said that?
yeah, it gets to absurdity. At some point, it just gets a little too far. I mean, my P10 still looks fine. Pixel matrices still look pretty good, but I will tell you, people now, if given the choice between P10 and P5, they're skipping the P10 and going straight to P5 and saying, okay, I've just future-proofed my show until, as Keith said, the new market direction is P1s or P3s, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, I have to go there! It's 6
Or
times
just
resolution."
LCD panels, right? And the whole show. I mean, we are, without our computer hardware getting better, we are right at the threshold of, the limit to what people can drive. Yeah, we've driven, more than 1 million channels on X-Lights, but the experience of building your show, rendering your show, and everything else is going to start to go south if we end up with that many more channels.
I agree. I don't think we've pushed the limits enough on our pixel shows, and we are already, looking at video mapping and laser mapping, and we become restless, and we have to introduce all the DMX stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think you make a good point that the markets start to push things, and someone goes, "Oh, Foggles, oh, laser, I've got to put that in my show. A P3 panel, I've got to do that." And you don't even have your show running on all cylinders yet, and you're bouncing to the next thing because the commercialization and sometimes polarization of this hobby kind of pushes people into that, and we fall for the traps.
So Ron, that's the marketing thing, right? So that's what it's consumer driven. At the end of the day, we start out in the community, and with like Great Christmas Light Fight, people see that and they say, "I want that. I want to be able to do that." So you get these major vendors out there that are selling in the big box stores. People think that that's the same thing. They go out there and it fails because it doesn't do what they want to do. And so then they find communities like ours where it is DIY and they think it's plug and play. And so what Keith is, you get to the point of technology is going to change. How many pixels can you pack into a display, and what's that cost of entry? And are people looking at, I'm going to buy 10,000 pixels for my first display because everybody else is doing that? That, right?
Yeah, if I didn't,
I will say this about P2s and P3s. I was installing P2s and P1.7s 7 years ago, and I can tell you from personal experience that the DIYer is not ready for those types of panels. You hold those things the wrong way, and pixels start going out. Then you start talking about, well, is it front serviceable or rear serviceable, and how do you mount this in a box without completely destroying the darn thing? And honestly, cost 7 years ago on a 1.7 for a tiny little platter that was maybe 12 by 18 inches was $4,000 at cost from China. So I can't imagine that we'll be that dense anytime soon, at least not from a cost perspective that makes sense.
Don't you think, though, too? I mean, they're
too
going to get
fragile.
to a point with density. I mean, you can make your whole house a TV screen. I mean, is that going to be interesting to the general public to come see it? And I don't know. I mean, we all have kind of the boundaries where you go, but I think the whole idea of pixels and light is still
I hear you, but that sounds like the law forum where people complain because people aren't using incandescents or LED lights. I mean, the reality is your taste and their taste ain't going to be the same. I personally don't like P panels, but that's just my taste. I can't sit there and tell you what others should do. The reality is that people will make their own decisions.
Well, it's funny, but I think that's where we're headed at. I think we've progressed so far into pixel lighting that we're going to start taking pixel lighting back. And by saying that, I think you're going to see a lot more displays with C9 faceted bulbs. And I've seen a couple vendors now having the old flower looking incandescent bulbs that are pixel based now with 5mm. So I think now you're going to start seeing the retrofit of the old school coming into the new pixel lighting, and that's going to be where the future is really going to take us with a style of light. But when you guys were talking about running everything off of, one strand, that's where the hobby really started at. I mean, when the 680 Standardization was built, it was built with a Molex connector on it that you could run 2,000 pixels off of one port. So you could dedicate all pixel data off of one port. That's what it was made for. But the hobby forked, and the original Falcon was born, and then the 682 was born, and then everybody started running their power off of multiple ports. But the hobby was initially born to go in one direction off of one port and power check Pro.
Pie in the sky, what if you had your props where they could have spatial references like drones, and your display could spatially know how it's laid out and communicate that back to your master control so that you didn't have to do your layout? And then it could control
We've
everything.
seen the twinkly light technology, which, in theory points a video camera at your layout and just pixel maps everything.
Okay, I'll vote for that one.
I personally think that's where the future is going to be, and you're going to see a controller on every prop and every string, just like you can go to Amazon now and buy a string of RGB lights with a remote control, and it has a built-in controller. I think that's where the future is. That makes it wireless, and then you can either use your phone or whatever to tap it once it's up, and then you're going to buy canned songs. I know some of the big boxes have tried to do something similar to this, but I think that's the only way you get the mass market. The way what we've been talking about this morning so far is just extending what we're currently doing. And I don't know that ever goes mass market. That still becomes the hobby period. But until somebody can make it easy to program and easy to plug in, just like regular Christmas lights, it's never going to get mass market. And I think somebody will come along and scoop up and go right past what we're doing as a hobby, and then make this a mass market. We'll look and say, how the hell did that happen? We weren't even involved.
Well, I noticed that at Home Depot the last couple of years that they have a little display down there of a show in a box type thing, and it doesn't go to the it's not large by any means, but it's pretty cool. I want to go the other direction a little because I'm old, and I remember being so excited at Christmas time, seeing all the lights, and people literally got huge for a while and really did lights and really went nuts with it. And then it went away. And all of a sudden it was just a few people kind of doing it. And the thing that really brought it back to where it's really getting a lot of notice now is the fact that people like Richard Holden in the early days with all these old controllers and everything just did compared to today, very simple. Here, listen to the music and listen to the lights. And then all of a sudden it started becoming very popular again.
Well, you said something interesting. You said simple. Are we doing our light shows for ourselves or for the people watching out front of our homes?
Oh, guys,
I think we sometimes confuse the two.
Well, let me tell you, I was a musician when I was younger, and so beats and different instruments doing things, and I used to try and make my lights so intricate. It was amazing. I mean, I would go out and I would just amaze myself at my talent at making lights dance. And then I decided to put up lights for Halloween, all non-specific lights, Christmas lights. And so what I did was I put up 3 singing faces, and I just was testing the lights to see if they work. I didn't care really. And I just put a whole house effect on all the rest of the lights. Here's my singing faces. I went out and people were as completely amazed with that blinky blinky as they were with all the intricate tough work that I had done that took hours and hours. And I discovered something. Ron, you're right. If we're doing it for the individuals that are out there, They don't know jack about any of this hobby. All they see is these wonderful colors changing and lights doing things and patterns going through it. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't have to be that complicated, which this is what I tell, when I've ever done a little thing for some group, just, just realize that the people that are watching don't necessarily need you to spend 72 to 1,000,000 hours sequencing something. That they're there to listen to music and see the lights, and if there's
I don't even know there's music half the time.
Yeah.
Well, I said the other thing, back to the thing about the Home Depot deal, is figure out pixels going bad. Why not get the actual double, whether it's 2 actual data wires or whatever, so that when one pixel burns out,
so
they don't all
rarely
go out.
fail. How often do pixels fail?
Not as much as people say they do.
No, nowhere near as many. I mean, my oldest pixel prop is going on 7 years, and it's had 3 pixels in 7 years go out.
Agreed.
Yeah, if you add a
I guess
panel
I've got
to your
bad luck
show,
then.
Keith, that'll change.
Hey
Add a
guys, if you don't mind
P10.
me chiming in while I have an opportunity, I'm in the middle of church. We just got into our second sermon, so I have a moment to talk for a second.
You are devoted.
It's a repeat of the sermon, so I've already heard it once. But I've been asked to just chime in just for a second. I think the hobby and the mass market are 2 different things, of course, right? As far as a hobby is concerned, I think it's always going to be drawn to 3 things, really. One is beauty, because what we're doing is an art form. When the advent of photography happened, painting didn't go away when we learned how to make a photograph, because it's still a different form of art. It's taking one thing and adding a unique impression of it. And that's what we do. We're taking, instead of a commercialized standard thing, we're taking our thoughts, our art, our impression of either music or some sort of animation. The second thing is, I think there's going to be more and more interactivity. If you go into the schools, most education that happens now, and overall, there's a lot more interactivity in general. Kids at the age of like 2 are on iPads, and they're getting used to interactivity.
Yeah.
So the more that we can engage the audience, I think that's going to be the general direction. And finally, oh, by the way, with interactivity, that's why I think projection mapping is just taking the market by storm, because projectors are getting cheaper and cheaper to make. There's software that's getting so quick with visualization recognition. There's companies out there like Lightform that are making it easier for someone who doesn't know anything about technology to basically put a camera in front of a building or an object. They'll automatically map it, and you can throw in effects down, which I think is fantastic. And finally, I think the thing that separates in the direction of it is anytime we're unique. The reason why things are exciting is because it's different. The first TV that happened was fantastic because it was a TV. Some people in the hobby will keep on going further with, higher pixel counts, and that's absolutely fine. And some people go in a different direction. But as long as it's unique and you're bringing something different to the table, I think it's constantly where the future will be going, if that makes any sense.
Although, of course, everyone just goes and buys your sequences, Tom, and puts them on their house, so they're not that unique.
Oh.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah.
That's true, but it depends on.
Australian.
Hey, Tom, you mentioned something about the photographers, but that whole thing. How many photographers went out of business when everybody had digital photography much easier on their phone? So we made
12.
photography, which could be a very expensive hobby, and you understand all the skill sets and the equipment behind it, and the cost of getting into that hobby if you're really serious shooting with prime lenses. So you have a lot of photographers in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that their bread and butter was photography, and they made names for themselves. And suddenly the cost point of getting into photography kept getting lower and lower because it became a digital front into it. And a lot of businesses are gone now.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
the
find
same
there's
thing
always
could happen in
demand for
this
the
hobby.
top 1%. In
top
any
1%.
hobby, any field. If you strive to be the best you can be, there's always a demand. And not only top of that, like I said, as long as you're adding the artistic impression, those are the people that stay in the game. The people who don't stay in the game are the people who fail to reinvent themselves, fail to actually stay on top of the technology changes. But the people get stuck in their way, and you see it all the time, like companies like Xerox that just decided not to expand, not to go with the flow. And then companies like Apple, who are willing to throw millions out the door just to make sure they're staying on top will constantly thrive.
Yep, I agree with you on that.
So the point that I love about Tom's point is interactivity. Because I agree, the one thing that makes your shows more engaging is if you can make it interactive, but making it effectively interactive is not a trivial thing to do. And, you know, we've seen, you know, the work that's been done around, you know, making it possible to vote for songs and choose songs. We've seen, you know, people, you know, some of the more creative people have found ways to give people control over their shows, even if it's just elements in their shows. But it's something that, again, is hard to do generically and then make it available to all. And I'm always curious about the ideas that people have for the ways in which we can make it easy for people to make their pixel displays more interactive. Probably not that appealing to people in Canada, but I can tell you down here where everyone's out of their cars and wandering around, if you can make your show interactive, it's just so much more engaging.
Maybe you need an X-Lights app for like the iPhone or the Galaxy where you can actually interact with the, you know, with the controllers or, you know, interact with the show.
That some of that's already there, though.
Yeah, there's an app for that already.
It is, but maybe it's not easy enough to use, right?
It's not easy. I think that to put it on the general public is what I'm saying, where you can say, hey, download an app and then come play.
But I think the thing is to that is how many TuneTooth sides do you have in your yard? They don't tune into a radio. Now you expect him to go onto an app store and find your app amongst millions of apps, download an app to control your show. I think a box in front of your show where you hit buttons or something like that. If you live in a colder environment, maybe it's closer to the road, you know, like how your mailbox sticks out. Maybe it attaches to the end of your mailbox and you can hit a button. I think that would be more achievable than an app. Because I think an app, like I said, I have 3 TuneTooth signs and I still walk up to people when they're tuned into the local country station. And they're like, oh, your show's beautiful. And I'm like, well, it goes to music. And they're like, no, get out of here. And I'm like, yeah, a little sign over there.
He's right. He's right.
I think trying to get somebody to download an app, I think if you have the app on your phone, and I think Xscheduler kind of covers us a little bit with the big buttons and that, and so does FPP. I think if you have the app, maybe you can go around showing people, you know, hit a button or something like that. But I think for somebody to physically go and download an app, I mean, I think it would have to be a greater mass of that. I mean, we have the Light Show Finder or whatever website. Maybe it's something like that where, you know, they download the app there, and if they're in the vicinity of one of the light shows that's on the Light Show Finder, then you can select that show to interact with. But I think just having them to download for your house in that general area, I just think it's going to be few and far in between.
So let's talk about something a little different, because I think the technology, I think we all agree that technology is going to change. It's going to get better. It's going to get cheaper. When it's, of course, the entry is always DIY, right? I mean, most, if not all of us started out, and we like this hobby because it is DIY. It's not just going to Home Depot or Lowe's and buying a bunch of, you know, pre-programmed sequences and plug it in. But let's talk about the people factor here for, you know, dealing with neighbors, dealing with HOAs, dealing with communities, dealing with traffic, those other issues that, how do we deal with more and more people as they get into, rather than just static lights and having these shows? At what point does that become more of a public, and I'll use the word nuisance because that's the word that I've seen a lot in these forums?
Dealing with HOAs, don't move into one.
Yeah.
Well, no, but if everyone in the board, if it's so easy to get into that everyone's doing it, then you're no longer the abnormal, you're now the norm.
Correct.
Yeah. But Clyde, to add on the point there from a X-Live's point of view, because I have the app on my iPad as well as phone for the X schedule. But one of the things I was thinking as a newcomer is that I don't really walk with my laptop wherever I go. I really just have my phone or my iPad. And so one of the things I think would be nice is that, like, sometimes if I'm in the office and I just want to take out my iPad and do some stuff on my X-Lights display, it would be great to be able to have some way to do that. So that, in other words, that there's an app that could also be installed onto iOS device, like an iPad or a phone, to be able to do some of my sequencing. And the second thing is that concerns me a lot is that I have like an entry level laptop that I run the show from now, and I'm just thinking when the time comes and I want to upgrade to another computer, you know, how transferable those files are going to be. And so it's even with COVID here, it has made even my company start to do a lot more cloud-based saving and sharing of files. And so I'm thinking, you know, the X-Lights may really more run off of like an app where it's a mainframe, so that I can switch from iPad to laptop to phone and still be able to control. And even if I switch my laptop to another computer, that I don't have to think of to save all these files. I can just go to a website and pick it up from there and keep going.
I store all my show stuff on OneDrive from Microsoft, and I jump between my laptop to my desktop, and because I fly and I do transportation for a living.
But can you do it with your iPad? Can you do it with your phone?
No, but I don't know if I'd want to, because I don't know how you're gonna sequence something with, you know, tapping your finger on stuff. I like to click and.
Yeah, but if you look at even all of the people who used to sit down and play their games on an Xbox or PlayStation, most of those developers of those games are now making those games available that you can play them on your iPad or your phone, because that's the way the technology is going. These new young kids are not really walking around with a laptop or a desktop. They're walking around with a notebook.
They might be the same people that are going to go buy the Home Depot box that's a show in the box. They might not be looking for the DIY stuff.
Hey, can we get
well,
back
I'm just
to Robert?
I'm just saying.
Can we get back to? I'm sorry. Can we get back to Carl's question, because I think that's a very interesting question and it has a lot of merit with what we do, dealing with our neighbors and our shows year over year, and the shows continue to expand. I think there is a point where we are going to run into problems with our neighbors. Now, if you have 3 acres and you live 4 miles from your nearest neighbor, this really isn't for you. But for many of us, certainly myself in California, this is going to be a tough year for some of my neighbors to have to deal with it again. And so what I think I'm going to have to do this year that I've never done before is say, look, my show starts at 7 p.m. and it ends at 8. And that's it.
Yeah. I don't know if you see.
I've got too many. I have, you know, I'm going to have 39,000 pixels on my house because I'm an idiot. I just don't know that I could put some of my neighbors through a 4 to 5 hour show 7 days a week. I don't think that's fair of me to ask them. And this is the year after the Light Fight show. So if I get a bunch of people, it can't be about pride. It's got to be, I have to be reasonable.
The girls have, they've said it a couple times on different meetings that they've been on. Before we started, we went to all the neighbors. We're in a small town, 800 people. We went to all the neighbors, said, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing. I mean, I had already bought the stuff, so it was going to happen. But, you know, at least we went to them and said, hey, we're buying this stuff. We're going to do it. Do you guys have a preference? Do you guys go to bed at 8 o'clock? You know, because the people right across the street, it's shining right in their windows. And every single one said, nope, absolutely not. We love it. Actually, our street in our town is the only one that all of the houses have lights on. So they liked it. The neighbors across the street actually turn the radio on in their house every once in a while and watch out the window, you know. So we might be
I'm afraid you're not the norm though, Ryan.
Right, because I'm in a small town, but everyone was welcoming since I went to them first and, you know, said, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing. If they have a problem with it, I said, you know, let me know if you want me to turn it off earlier. That's, you know, I understand. I've lived in big cities too. I know it's different. You're not as close with your neighbors in big cities, but that's what we did, and it worked out really well for us.
Yeah, Keith, did you ever work out your ordeal with your neighbor? I know when we spoke last summer, that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, we have tension. I've adapted my show like you say. You know, we don't start our show until 8:30 because, quite frankly, it doesn't get dark until then. Right. But we are firmly off by 10 every night, so it's only an hour and a half really. And I supervise the whole show. I sit out there and supervise it, and I turn it off. We don't run radio anymore because radio I can't control the volume of. People sit out there and they turn their cars up and they turn their sort of bass up in their stereo, and I can't control that sort of stuff. So yeah, I've made adjustments to try and address it. We don't promote it. I've taken my house off all of those locators and everything, because quite frankly, I got enough repeat visitors. I don't need new ones.
So that goes back to the technology discussion then, right? Of you're talking about FM, and FM radio has changed, and all these new cars, it's all digital broadcast, right? So now you have a delay, and that's becoming more and more prevalent. Obviously, Bluetooth doesn't work. Wireless is not persistent. So versus
the speaker works,
right? Versus just having speakers, what do you do?
Well,
I think you go old school like the drive-in. They hang the speaker.
I just want to point out that this subject is the subject of a room in 5 minutes in room 3.
So that's a good point, Bill. We slated an hour for this. I've got another presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and keep this room open for people who want to continue to talk through this, because there's nothing else in this room at the 2 o'clock hour. I think it's great conversation. I'm going to go ahead and stop the live stream. We're going to pull the raffle, and then y'all are welcome to stay in this room and just continue the conversation, because I think it's a great topic, and I think it's something that we might get something out in, for next year. But I appreciate everybody's input on this. So let me go ahead and stop